Production funding for QED with Dr. B is provided by
Battelle cares about STEM because it was part of our founding. Gordon Battelle, our founder, believed in building an institute that would actually better society through the use of science and technology. And this year we're going to hit a goal of 1 million students a year that we'll be able to impact around the country.
American Electric Power Foundation, boundless energy for brighter futures. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Frederick Bertley, scientist and President and CEO of COSI. Welcome to QED with me, Dr. B. Let's talk about science.
Today we're talking about emotions, and Dr. B, we all have emotions, and I would venture to say that we probably think we know a lot about them. You often hear people talking about getting in touch with their emotions, having emotional intelligence, but there's a lot more to emotions than that.
You know, it's so interesting you say that. Scientifically, emotions are really, really complicated. In fact, there's even a debate on what the definition is of emotions.
Well, I'm looking forward to learning more about emotions from a scientific perspective. So later in the show, we'll explore how scientists are studying emotions. Then we'll hear about how emotions develop as we age. But first, let's step back and unravel some of the myths surrounding emotions.
And in this segment, we'll also learn about how our emotions are learned and even controlled. And for more on that, I spoke to Dr. Lisa Barrett from Northeastern University to help us define emotions and bust some myths surrounding them. We all think we know a lot about emotions, but you have found out that there are a lot of myths out there when it comes to this field.
So there's this belief that we come into the world with a lizard brain for instincts like feeding and fighting, fleeing and mating. And then we also come with these innate circuits for emotions in a part of the brain which wraps around this lizard brain. And then the top of the brain that's really large and supposedly for rationality. And so none of that is true. The neuroscience evidence is pretty clear that our brain didn't evolve that way. It doesn't function that way. You don't have a lizard brain. And you certainly don't have innate or inborn emotion circuits.
How exactly would you define the term emotion?
Yeah, so scientists actually debate this. It's a people experience emotions, and no one disputes this, but nobody can agree on actually how to define an emotion. So what I would say is an emotion is no different than any other mental event you experience in your life. Your brain's main job is to control the systems of your body and to make sense of what is going on inside your body in relation to what's happening around you in the world. So the same racing heart can be a part of anger. It could be a part of sadness. It could be a part of happiness. It can be an indication that you had too much coffee to drink. It can mean that you're running up the stairs. There's no difference in the racing heart. The difference is in how the brain makes that heart racing meaningful in a psychological sense. Your brain has to make it meaningful as an emotion by knitting together the different signals from what's going on inside the body and outside in the world. And that's what an emotion is. That sounds really kind of general, and that's because it is. That also describes what a thought is, and it also describes what, a perception is. There isn't really any difference really in those experiences. To us, they feel very distinct, but the same parts of the brain are being used.
Are emotions different than feelings?
Some scientists define emotion as feelings, and some scientists don't. I would say that there are a set of feelings that are always with you all the time, whether you're emotional or not, because your brain's main job is to regulate the dozens and dozens of systems in your body. Right now, even as you and I are talking and our audience is listening, each of us, right, has a whole drama going on inside our own bodies that has to be coordinated. And your brain is doing that 24/7. And as that's happening, your body is sending information back to the brain about the state of your heart, the state of your lungs, the state of your immune system as simple feelings. Feeling pleasant, feeling unpleasant, feeling worked up, feeling calm. These are what a scientist like me would call affect, but we colloquially call it mood. That mood is with you every moment of your life. And those feelings can be part of an episode of emotion, but they can also exist on their own.
So if we're not necessarily born with these pre-wired emotions, how do the emotions develop?
To me, this was one of the most startling and really cool discoveries. A baby's brain, like a newborn's brain, is not a miniature adult brain. It's a brain that is unfinished, and it's waiting for wiring instructions from the surrounding world. For example, when a baby's born, a baby can't see. The visual system is not finished. And actually, the baby's brain wires itself literally to the distance between that baby's eyes in that baby's skull. The brain is receiving wiring instructions from the baby's own body, but it's also receiving wiring instructions from the world. And part of that world is other people who interact with that baby. And all of these things that the baby is exposed to actually wires its brain. And this is how information can transfer from one generation to the next without genes. It's called cultural inheritance. Of course, this is always happening throughout your whole life. It's called plasticity, but it's very, very potent in the first few years of life.
Well, I've heard you talk about being an architect of your own experience. Can you explain that phrase?
Right. So emotions don't happen to you. They're made by you. They're made by your brain. Nobody has as much control as they want to have. And there are differences in how much control people have just because of life circumstances, right? Some people have more choice than other people. But everybody has a little bit more control than they probably realize that they do. Your brain is automatically using past experiences to predict what's going to happen in the future, and then that becomes your present. You may not have control over what was originally wired into your brain, but you can cultivate new experiences for yourself now that can change the predictions that your brain will automatically make in the future. It's kind of like any kind of skill building. When you started to learn to drive, it took a lot of concentration, but then with practice, it became pretty automatic. You can train your brain to predict differently in the future. And that is a kind of control over your experience that maybe you didn't realize that you had. Sometimes we're responsible to change things, not because we're to blame for them, but because we're the only ones who really can. And that change is often harder than we want it to be, and it often takes longer than we want it to take, but it's possible.
Listening to Dr. Barrett's interview, it's interesting how she was saying that you can learn to control some of your programming and your emotions. And just like any other skills, you can actually build your emotional skills.
I mean, this is so amazing. We heard of emotional IQ, and we've heard of, hey, control your emotions, but it's really fascinating. We actually can. That's a skill we can develop. And a lot of people don't realize that. So you can be in touch with your emotions.
We might think we know a lot about emotion, but there are entire fields of study devoted to understanding human emotions. And in our next interview, we talk to a researcher who's using animals to better understand our emotions.
That's right. A lot of new and exciting research is being done around emotions, but it's something that's actually hard to study and quantify. But there's one group out of Caltech that's looking to better understand humans by studying animal behaviors. And for more on that, I spoke to Dr. David Anderson at Caltech. What are some of the challenges in studying emotions?
Everybody has a different idea of what emotions are, and nobody can agree on what the definition should be. And they're also really hard to measure because fundamentally there's something that you can't see, or you can guess, but you can't directly measure them.
How do you define the term emotion?
My definition of emotion does not include subjective feelings, which is how most people think of emotions. If we think of the brain's emotion function as kind of an iceberg, the feeling part of emotion is just the tip of the iceberg above the sea of consciousness. And there's a whole big part of the iceberg in the brain under the water that we try to understand. And those are fundamentally brain states. They change the way your brain reacts to a particular stimulus. Sleep is an example. When you're asleep, you might not hear a pin drop on the floor, but you would hear somebody blow a car horn if it was loud enough. When you're awake, you hear both. So emotions change the way your brain interprets the outside world and what it tells you to do with the information from the outside world.
Now, your team is working to quantify and measure these emotions, and you're doing so by studying various types of animals. Why are you studying so many different types of animals?
So we come at emotion as biological functions of the brain. They arose through evolution by natural selection. And that means that if we study other animals, we should be able to see sort of pieces of emotion or evolutionary precursors of emotion that developed along the way leading to us. It's not like emotions suddenly appeared all at once with the advent of human beings. Why do we want to study animals? If you study only humans, you put people in brain scanners, you ask them how they feel. Patient says, I feel afraid, if you show them a scary movie, and you scan their brain and you might see some activity lighting up in some part of the brain. But that is just a correlation. It doesn't mean that the brain activity is producing emotion. Could be that the emotion is producing the brain activity, or that something else is producing both of them that you're not measuring. And the only way to determine what is causing what is to be able to get into the brain and intervene, change the pattern of neuronal activity, and see if that changes the emotion state. If it does, then you can say that the brain activity is causing the emotion state. Animals allow us to intervene in the brain in ways that we can't do in humans.
How do you know that a fruit fly is angry?
You can watch the behavior of animals. For example, both dogs and cats like to roll on their backs with their belly in the air when you come over to them. And that is almost a universal gesture of submission in the animal kingdom. That's their way of saying, I'm not a threat. I'm not going to hurt you. Don't attack me. And so we can infer from that type of behavior that there's some sort of state underlying it. And so if we see these things that are shared across many animals and we see that they last a long time and they can be stronger or weaker, then we can start to say, okay, here are some objective features that tell me about what the animal is doing and how the animal is doing it. We still don't have a specific test that we can do to measure an emotion state in an animal. And so our measurements of emotion they're indirect, and they involve looking at a sort of constellation, a set of features.
What feature outcomes do you hope that this research leads to?
What I hope it will lead to is a better understanding of how animal brains control their behavior and how similar their emotional control is to ours, and in turn that will lead us to better understand our own emotional brains. If you think about mental illness as involving maladaptations of emotion systems, too much fear, too much anger, or it lasts too long. If we can understand how those things actually happen when somebody is in a state like that, we may have a better way to treat those disorders in humans. There hasn't been a fundamentally new drug for depression or anxiety or any other psychiatric disorder approved by the Food and Drug Administration in the last 50 years. And that's because we don't understand the emotional brain well enough. But there's so many people working on this now. I'm very optimistic that there will be some breakthroughs and understandings and maybe in treatments over the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow, I never realized how much we still didn't understand about emotions. And I think it's amazing that as we study them more, that we might be able to develop better drugs to fight emotion-related illnesses and diseases.
That's incredible. No new drugs in the last 10 years. But it's amazing how understanding behaviors and emotional primitives in animals, just like the fruit fly, can actually help us understand what emotions do for us as humans, and that may lead to new advancements.
Yeah, and in that first segment, Dr. Barrett talked about when we're babies that our brains aren't fully developed, but they develop over time, right?
Yes, not only are certain things wired into your brain after birth, you also develop emotions as you age and gain experience. And for more on that, I talked with Dr. Zainab Sagan from The Ohio State University. You study how the brain develops and changes through experience. Can you talk about this?
Absolutely. Decades ago, we had the invention of functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, and other neuroimaging methods. And with these, we are able to see exactly what parts of the brain, of the human brain, respond to different, mental tasks. And because it's non-invasive, we can do this over and over again. And we can see how brain regions talk to each other, how they communicate with each other, and how that gives rise to uniquely human cognition. So it's super cool. And so we have this nice understanding of the functional organization of the brain, what parts of the brain do what. And that's really cool, but what really fascinates me is how did all of this get there, right? Like, how did all of this arise? And are we born with that? So with this technology, we have the ability to scan babies while they're asleep. We're able to get nice detailed images of their brain and how brain regions talk and communicate with one another. And then when they're a little bit older, we invite them back in. Hey guys! And we scan them again. So today we are going to scan your brains. And that means we're going to be taking pictures of your brain while they are watching movies and listening to stories, or people reading stories. And we look at what parts of the brain are active, how they talk to each other. And what we're trying to do is build these rich computational models that are based on biology that allow us to predict later cognitive and behavioral outcome in each child based on their early brain data.
If you can talk a little bit about the safety of that for our audience.
Absolutely. So the MRI device is FDA approved, and we don't use injections or anything or sedation. My own babies were scanned within like a week or two of birth, both of them. We put in earplugs because the scanner is sometimes loud, and they sleep comfortably throughout the whole thing. There's an experimenter there in the room, the parent can be there in the room, but overall I think it's an enjoyable experience for everyone. We also are able to share our research with families, which I think is rewarding for us as well as the parents that come in.
Okay, great. And some of the neat, almost surprising developments that came from your research is these two brain parts, the amygdala and the visual cortex, and perhaps a connection between the two. And what's that connection between the two that you've discovered through these MRIs?
Absolutely. So the amygdala is a small almond-shaped structure. It's sort of like in the middle of your brain, and we typically think of it as like a fear center. So, if you're in a dark alleyway and you start panicking, that's the amygdala at work. If you're, about to go on stage before a recital or something and you start sweating, that's the amygdala. But it also does like positive learning and memory stuff. So if you, we're in a grassy field, the smell of freshly cut grass might trigger a childhood memory of playing hide and seek with your friends. In primates and humans, right, so the amygdala and parts of the amygdala seem to be a bit enlarged. And we think that it is also involved in higher order social cognition, your social ranking and popularity among friends, things like that. So a bit more nuanced stuff. But the amygdala it can't do this all by itself. It connects with visual regions that allow us to know what it is that we're looking at. So it connects with high-level visual cortex, which is around here in the brain, in adults, and a lot of previous studies have shown this. What we found in this study was that newborn amygdala is not only connected to these high-level visual areas, but it's also connected to low-level visual areas that do basic visual processing. So it's not preferentially connected to one thing. So some connections, if they're no longer needed or necessarily, they will deteriorate, and that happens very early on. But the ones that remain are the ones that are strongest, and they continue to strengthen as they co-activate.
Got it. And how does that connect to emotion?
Anyone who's been around newborns know that they experience things like hunger or pain, and adults will interpret that as sadness or frustration. But emotions are complex, right? You have to have certain experience with things to know whether or not, is this tree friendly, right? Or is this animal friendly? Can I approach it or not? We have complex ways of expressing emotion, right? So or even language that we use to express ourselves. So it's very complex, and there's a lot of learning that has to happen. So there might be different cultures might interpret different emotions in different ways. There might be socially inappropriate ways that you would express emotions, right? And so all of that learning takes time and experience.
That's so interesting, because if you put a big grizzly bear in front of most adults, we'll be scared. We may run or not, we may freeze, but we'll be scared.
Yeah.
But if you take a newborn or even a 6-month-old and you plop that baby right in front of that same grizzly bear,
they might be curious.
Right? But they probably won't be scared.
They won't.
Right?
They will not be scared.
And so it is somewhat learned that,
yes.
Okay, wait a minute, this could be a dangerous situation.
Absolutely.
What do you want parents to know about the research you're doing and how it may help their babies moving forward in a bunch of different areas?
Absolutely. So one of the pieces of advice that I have for parents is to be a role model for how one can regulate and express emotions. So while you're reading a book, talk through the different social contexts and how you might respond, like how different characters might respond, and then how you would respond. Ask your child if they can talk, how they would respond to it, and encourage them to be able to talk about their feelings with you and engage in that yourself too. Talk about how you're feeling, talk about how different things make you feel. And through that, I think you will also learn to be able to regulate your emotions better and demonstrate that to your child as well, and in that way be able to support them on their emotional developmental journey. Cool. All right.
My takeaway from today's show is that we still have a lot to learn about emotions. They're very complex, but I really like the idea that they can change over time. Dr. B, what about you?
You're so right. There's so much more to learn scientifically about emotions, but a few things jumped out. One, we are evolutionarily wired to have emotions, and that's really exciting. So it's okay to be emotional. Secondly, we can actually control our emotions if we work on it, and that's really hopeful as we try to navigate life's journey. And that's QED with Dr. B. That's me. Join us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we'll see you next time.
So I'm going to show you a picture, and it's a picture of a person, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what you see. What emotions do you see this person expressing? Then I'll reveal the larger context.
So the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, the person's crying, sad, upset. The person could be reacting to a bad smell. The person could be just, cringing because there's too much sunlight coming in, and they're being blinded. And so I'll throw those out as possible.
Yeah, so that's actually, all of those things are things that people usually say. If I say, what emotions is this person experiencing? Often people will say, this person's crying, they must be sad, or they must be really upset by something. If I say, what's going on for this person? So I don't even mention emotion. They might say, oh, there's sun in this person's eyes, or this person's really tired. Let's reveal the context.
I can't remember this artist's name, but it's a pianist who is into his piano concerto or whatever he's playing, and he is in it and he's feeling it.
We have lots of examples like this that I use when I'm giving public talks to people, where if you just show part of the face without the context, you see one thing, and then you reveal the context, and then you see something completely different.
Production funding for QED with Dr. B is provided by
Battelle cares about STEM because it was part of our founding. Gordon Battelle, our founder, believed in building an institute that would actually better society through the use of science and technology. And this year we're going to hit a goal of 1 million students a year that we'll be able to impact around the country.
American Electric Power Foundation, boundless energy for brighter futures. And by viewers like you. Thank you.